Hello everybody, welcome to another lesson. This lesson is on the four main musical clefs. It's a guide to recognising and using the treble, the alto, the tenor and the bass clefs, and how you can write from one to another at the same pitch. It's for primarily sit-in theory exams up to grade 5 with most common boards, but it's also for general musicianship. So what are the four main clefs? Now, although in music there are many clefs, there were 10 in all, but now they've been narrowed down and we're going to concentrate on just the four main ones required for this standard of theory. So, the four main clefs used in music are the treble or G clef, the alto or C clef, the tenor or C clef, and the bass or F clef. So why do we bother having different clefs? Well, the clef is a sign, it's an indication for the range of notes, and it fixes a note for reference. So using different clefs makes it possible to write music for all instruments and voices, no matter what pitch or range that they might cover. So the first one is called the treble clef. It's a very common clef, and if you've been doing music theory in the past you will have seen this clef. The treble clef is used for instruments and voices that have a higher range of notes and is sometimes referred to as the G clef. Now this is because it fixes the note G above middle C, in other words G4, and its shape surrounds the second line where the G4 is written. If you look at the little symbol at the bottom, you can see the curl at the bottom surrounds the second line up on the staff. And it's used for such instruments as a violin or a flute or a trumpet. And the soprano voice uses this clef. Also, sometimes a piano player would say that's the sign for his right hand. It's not the sign for the right hand, it's actually the sign for a range of notes that the right hand would normally use. This is the alto clef. This is not as common as the treble. The alto clef is used for instruments or voices that have a medium to high range of notes, and is sometimes referred to as the C clef. Now it's called the C clef because it fixes the note C, not any C, but C4, which is middle C, and it fixes it to the middle line of the staff where C4 note, middle C, usually sits on. And it goes, as you can see, through the centre of the clef itself. So if you look at the diagram, you can see the centre line, the third line up, going right through the centre of the clef, and that's where middle C would normally sit on this clef. You find instruments such as a viola and an alto trombone, as well as alto voice, can use this clef. The third clef is the tenor clef. Now the tenor clef is used for instruments or voices that have a low to medium range of notes, and very similar to the alto clef, it is also sometimes referred to as the C clef. This is because it fixes the note C4, middle C, to the fourth line this time of the staff where middle C sits on. Again, look at the diagram, you'll see the fourth line up going through the centre of the clef. And instruments such as a trombone or a bassoon, as well as tenor voice, can use this clef. And the last of the four, the bass clef. Again, you might have seen this clef and used it. The bass clef is used for instruments or voices that have a low range of notes and is sometimes referred to as the F clef. Now, similar to the others, this is because it fixes the note F3. F3 is the F just below middle C, or C4. And as you can see by the diagram, the fourth line of the staff, where the F note would normally go on, goes right through between the two dots of the clef. Instruments such as the double bass, the trombone, tuba, as well as the bass voice again, can use this clef. Now, perhaps the terminology of fixing a note might seem quite complicated. So, although I've pointed it out for the reasons of why we have different clefs, it's much easier to see how each of the four clefs match up together when we see middle C written on them, C4. So, as we can see from the diagrams, here is exactly the same note, middle C or C4, written on each of those four main clefs. The first one at the top, you can see C, middle C, C4, written on the first ledger line below the staff. However, on the alto clef, we can see that C4 is written on the middle line. Notice how the same line, again, as we explained earlier, runs through the centre of the clef. So that note that is indicated on the diagram is middle C, exactly the same as the treble clef. On the third one down, on the tenor clef, C4 is written on the fourth line up. Again, notice how the same line runs through the centre of the clef itself. So that makes the clef look as though it's displaced above the staff. And last but not least, on the bass, again, there's middle C, C4, written on the first ledger line above the staff. So each of these notes that I've indicated are all exactly the same note. They're all C4, which is middle C. Okay, so utilising that information, here is a small extract that's written on the treble clef, but it needs to be written on the alto clef. So we want exactly the same notes, in other words, the same pitch, but written this time, instead of on the treble, on the alto. So this is how we do it. Here's the extract again, just for ease of perusal. So step number one, on the treble clef, we're looking at the very first note. The very first note, of course, is E, but we need to compare it to where it is to C4, in other words, middle C. So as you can see, the actual E, the first note of the extract, is E4. It's the first E you would come to just above middle C. So therefore, step two will be, when we put our new clef on, the alto clef, we want to find exactly the same note. In other words, where is E4? Well, if C4 is on the third line up, as indicated, then E4 is going to be on the fourth line up. So now, if we continue on comparing where each note is to middle C as a reference, you'll be able to write out the original extract at exactly the same pitch, but this time using the alto clef instead. Now that method will work from any clef to any other clef. Now, although I didn't mention this at the start, there is a very common alternative. And occasionally you will see this clef that's written here, which at first sight looks exactly the same as a treble clef. But do you notice the little number 8 that's underneath it? Now this clef sometimes substitutes for a tenor clef, because it means that the music is written as normal on the treble clef. So for example, the third space up would still be a C, C5, but the actual sounds made by the instrument or the voice are heard an octave lower than written. So you are writing C5, but you would be hearing from the instrument C4. Now this clef can be used as an alternative to the tenor clef, as I mentioned, in scoring, and an example of an instrument that uses this clef is the guitar. So how else can we use these four clefs? We most commonly see all four of the common clefs, the treble, alto, tenor and bass, in very classically based open score. Okay, the first using the traditional tenor clef, and the second using the octave lower treble clef as an alternative to it. So as you can see, on the left hand side, we would be referring to C4 on middle C as the fourth line up. On the treble, the octave treble that's in place of it, if we wanted to hear middle C, then you would actually write it in the third space up as C5. Now, as you can see from the previous slide, open score was when you have each of the lines written out separately, something similar to what it is on this page. But a short score is when a line of music written for each of the four main clefs is written together but just using treble and bass clefs. Now, this is used most commonly when vocal ranges such as soprano, alto, treble and bass are used. And here's a piece that looks in open score. So how do we take those four separate lines of music, the treble or the soprano, the alto, the tenor and the bass, and put them into two clefs? Well, this is how it's done. The soprano line is written on the treble clef, but the actual note stems, or the sticks, they always point upwards on the treble clef. Whereas the alto line, which is also written on the treble clef, the note stems, the sticks, point downwards. So the soprano sticks up, alto sticks down. For the tenor line, that's written on the bass clef, this time with the sticks pointing upwards. And the bass line is also written on the bass clef, but with the note sticks pointing downwards. So that's the tenor with sticks up and the bass with sticks down. So the soprano is on the treble with sticks up, the alto on the treble with sticks down. The tenor is on the bass clef with sticks up, and the bass is on the bass clef, but also with the sticks pointing downwards. So here's a comparison. If you look at the extract on the left, that's the open score. You can see the soprano line on the treble, the alto line on the alto, the tenor line on the tenor, and the bass line on the bass. But then you look at the short score on the right. If we look at the treble clef, you can see the first note with the stick pointing upwards is the same as the soprano first note, the A. If you look underneath it, you can see the stick pointing down. That's the alto line. So when we look at the open score, we can see the note is on the fourth line up, which is E4. It's the E just above middle C. So therefore, we're looking at the short score, you can see it's the E on the first line of the treble clef, which is the same E, the first one you come to above middle C. And so on with the tenor and the bass clef. Now, there are alternatives to the usage of the clefs. This is actually more common. You can see where the alto line is written on a treble clef rather than using the alto clef. And also the tenor line is using that octave lower treble clef indication. Just give you a second to look at the left hand one. You can refer the notes. If you look at the short score, you'll see that's how we put it in. For example, the treble will have the soprano line with the sticks up and the alto line with the sticks down, and the bass will have the tenor line with the sticks up and the bass line with the sticks down. Now, if you want to click back on this particular one, you'll see that both the short score versions from this alternative open score and the original open score are exactly the same answer. Now, just a note that if any students are thinking of doing the examination with the associated board, the ABRSM, they've now dropped the question since 2018 actually, where the requirement to rewrite open to short score as an examination question is no longer existent. However, there are still some boards that require this, and they've retained the requirement to write from open to short score. And also, because this lesson isn't just about doing an examination, it's to improve your general musicianship, and obviously that's why I've included this information in the lesson. And also, the other note I wanted me to make is that I've not included writing key signatures on these clefs, because I've actually discussed and gone through all of that in the lesson that I've done called Major Keys and Scales. So if you want to see how to write key signatures, sharps and flats, go over to the other lesson that's called Major Keys and Scales. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you found the lesson helped you, and if you do, please go and have a look at the others that I've done.